We'll probably go ahead and get started, and I'll just let people in as they join. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Andrea Morse, and I'm the Interim Assistant Director for Study Abroad at the University of Wisconsin-Stout. And today we have Sarah Stackhouse with us to talk about the Critical Language Scholarship. So Sarah, if you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself. And thank you for being here today.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. So my name is Sarah. I'm the International Admissions Counselor at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. But I was a participant in the Critical Language Scholarship Program. I've been a Critical Language Scholarship Ambassador as well for 2 years. So yeah, I'm just here to talk today more about my personal experience in the CLS program, to answer some of your questions about maybe the program itself, what it entails. So we'll probably chit chat for maybe, I would say, about 20 or so minutes. And then definitely we can open up for questions and just talk a little bit more about my experience. I do apologize. I'm on vacation in Hawaii right now, and this was the quietest place I could find. So you may hear birds or maybe some people. So, but hopefully we should be able to make it work. But with that, we can go ahead and get started. So again, as mentioned, my name is Sarah. I was in Lucknow, India. And so we'll kind of get to different countries and locations a little bit later, but I did my critical language scholarship experience in 2019. And so the critical language scholarship program, it typically is a summer, so about 2.5-ish so months, 2 to 2.5 months, depending on which country and which language that you're studying. I went through the Northeast Wisconsin Technical College in Green Bay, Wisconsin. That's where I was a student. So in order to participate in the CLS program, you do have to be a fully enrolled like college student. And so at the time I was going back for my associate degree in digital marketing, but I do have my bachelor's and master's already. A lot of the students that participate will literally be like just completing their first year of studies, all the way through to people who are doing research for their PhD. And so there's such a wide breadth of people that participate in the program, kind of their background, their experience, some people that have been abroad, some people that have never been abroad. It really just kind of depends on your why. And I can get a little bit more to that as we go on. But that's just a little bit about me and kind of the program that I was studying. And so for me, I had previously studied in the UK, in Aberdeen, Scotland, and Bath, England, as well as I was an exchange student to Thailand in high school. So for me, I already had quite a bit of significant study abroad experience. I just wanted to put that out there. So as mentioned, some students will have significant experience being abroad, which makes them a good fit for the program. But then also, we had people in my cohort who this was their very first international flight, right? So you have everything in between, and I think that's something that's really cool about the program, is it really is accepting of so many different people from a diverse, backgrounds. Typically, if you look at the past criteria of the students that have come out of Wisconsin, so basically on their website, the Critical Language Scholarship website, you can go through and search the alumni. I was the only one ever to go through a technical college in Wisconsin, which was pretty fun. I would say most of the students that do participate in the program do come out of Madison. I'm trying to help promote it a little bit more on my campus in Eau Claire, but definitely it's open for anyone who is a degree-seeking student. So it can't be like for a certificate or anything like that. They do have to be going specifically for a degree. And really being able to attach that degree, right, to their why of why this program will help them succeed. And so the Critical Language Scholarship Program, as I mentioned, it's a summer study abroad program. And as kind of the name tells you, it's critical languages, right? So there's critical languages identified by the US government that are essential for US interests domestically and abroad for security purposes, economic purposes, and everything like that. And so they identified the languages. And then I was just going to show you here. Yeah, so when I went, these were kind of the languages that existed. And so I know some of these may have changed since then for the no experience required or some prerequisites. So like Arabic, for example, you had to have 1 or 2 years when I went, Japanese, Korean, that kind of thing. But I ended up going for Urdu in India. And so that one didn't require any experience prior. And so you can have complete beginners. We have also like So I had a lot of people in my cohort as well that were either from India or Pakistani heritage that spoke like Hindi or Urdu at home, but never had that tangible learning, like language learning, if that makes sense, experience for reading, writing, poetry, different things like that. But they were like a speaker of it, but they didn't necessarily have that reading, writing background behind it. And so we had quite a few students like that in our group. We had students that were studying, as mentioned, for their PhD, doing research projects in Pakistan. So it really just kind of depended on, everyone's why, which we can get to a little bit later. But the one thing that's really nice is a fully funded, everything's paid for except for your passport, experience. And a lot of times, if you think of like the Boren Fellowship or anything like that, there's going to be some type of government work attached to it once you return home. That's the one thing that's really nice about the Critical Language Scholarship Program, is that there is no like requirement to do any like tangible government work once you get back. So I would say it's kind of one of those programs where it's like, wow, it's fully funded and there's no strings attached, and it really is that. As mentioned, when I got back, I became a alumni ambassador, which was a lot of fun. So I was able to talk with students that wanted to apply and kind of going through the process and everything like that. Can you guys still hear? But are you coming to tomorrow's meeting?
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me okay?
I'm going to mute the other participants. You can go ahead, Sarah.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't hear that well. But yeah, and then the other thing that's really nice is it truly is for all fields of study. So it's like at Northeast Wisconsin Technical College, we didn't have an Urdu language program, right? And so a lot of students that go to study, whether they're first year or just beginners in the language, it doesn't mean their school has to have that specific program. And as mentioned, right, Indonesian, Bangla, Persian, Punjabi, Swahili, I would say in the University of Wisconsin system, I'm part from Madison. Some of us may have a few of these languages, but that's why these languages are critical, right? Because they're not as well practiced or not as well common, right, throughout our different programs. So I had people that were studying pre-med who wanted to go on to like Doctors Without Borders, for example. We had people, one girl, she was a English, like an English teacher. And so she wanted to be able to use the language to be able to do like more poetry and that kind of thing in a different language. So that was really fun. A couple other, I would say, pre-med students. I myself, I went as, and I was currently working at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, and I was an admissions counselor at the time. And so for me to be able to learn Urdu, I was able to then say, okay, I want to use this practically in my job every single day to recruit students, right, to come study in the United States, which kind of has that tie in with their cultural values and using it economically, right? And not only being able to say, yep, I want to learn it because it's a passion of mine, but how am I going to tangibly use this in what I do every single day? And so that's kind of how I had my pitch as an international admissions counselor. That was more of my tie into the language. But yeah, really everything in between. And then we did have some people who were in like I think it was from Washington, some of the best Urdu programs in the country. I think we had 2 or 3 students from there. But really, it was just such a diverse group of people that just kind of had that passion for not only language learning, but something tangible to tie it to that they really could use it going forward with. So this is just a quick little overview of what the like fully fundedness of the scholarship includes. So like your visa fees, we had round trip international airfare, we had an orientation in Washington, D.C. prior, and then we left from Washington, D.C. Your housing, meals, your classroom instruction. We got to do different cultural programming and trips as well. And then we also, if we so choose, we got academic credit if we wanted to go through the testing process to get that once we were done, which I did do that. And I would say definitely worth it. Definitely worth it while you're going through the process anyways. So this is just a little bit more information. So basically, you kind of have the same weekly schedule where you have, you know, the classes that you have whether it's reading, writing, listening, speaking, everything like that. Then you have a cultural element, which I have pictures later that I can show you. But basically what this is meant to do, this program, is it's meant to teach you basically 1 year of language in the matter of 2 months, 2.5 months. So you can imagine it's quite intense. And it's really for those that are going to put the time, effort, and energy into studying, who are passionate about it, who don't just want I don't want to say like any study abroad experience, but they're catered to that specific language and why they want to learn it, how they want to learn it. There really needs to be that why. And so typically on a given year, they have over 5,000 students apply for the various languages, and they accept about 500. So that kind of tells you how competitive it is. And depending on the language and kind of your experience, that can really make the difference as well too, if you're coming in as a beginner, or if you've already studied the language for a little bit, that can really make a difference if you're accepted to the program or not. But yeah, so basically you go through the weekly schedule. We had cultural classes as well, which I'll show you some pictures of what I did. We did have some group trips as well, which basically help with that language immersion. The other thing that's really nice is you are able to live depending on the program. So depending on the program, we either have a host family, which I had, which was a lot of fun. And all of us that know study abroad, right? Everything is always 10 times better with a host family. Well, it comes with sometimes its own set of issues, but most of the time, everything's always better with the host family for the immersion experience, and especially as it's a language program, that really gives you that extra benefit of, so it might not be classroom hours, right, but you're at home time, you're really getting that extra language immersion, which is really, really important as you're going along. And then depending on as I mentioned, the language in the country, some of the students did stay in dorms or hostels as well. So it just kind of depends. Every program is unique with the language, and then how many students they have, how big is their cohort. That's really going to kind of depend on the language itself. So, but yeah, you can see kind of the main purpose, right, is truly going to be that language immersion, but not only learning it to learn the language, but then again, being able to use it applicably once you are done with the program as well. So this is just a quick little blurb that they normally give out for ideal candidates, what they look for. Really, it is from all different backgrounds. As I mentioned, I had students from like Harvard and Yale and Washington, kind of your big name schools. And then I came from Northeast Wisconsin Technical College, right? And so I was the only one in my cohort in Lucknow that was studying at a technical college at the time. So that was really fun to be able to represent the techs and be proud of that, right, as I'm going through. And so it is quite competitive in terms of, you have a lot of campuses where they do have strong language programs. And so that's not the only element that they look for, is their language ability, right? So I applied as a beginner in Urdu, but really having that sense of why and that applicability to, okay, here's how their investment, right, the US government's investment in me as a cultural ambassador, right, to go abroad to learn a language, and then to be able to use it applicably, right? Because in my job, in my role every day, when I'm traveling or talking with students or families, I'm going to be able to use that language, right? And it's going to be able to make my job when I'm traveling easier, but then also it really helps with that communication, breaking down those barriers, right, with students that we go to recruit. And so they really could tangibly see that why, which I do believe is why I've been selected for the program. I also applied for, where else was I supposed to go? Oh, for Bangla. And so the program ended up being virtual because of COVID, but I was accepted to that program as well. But I decided, the one little caveat for CLS is students can only do it 2 times in their life. And so basically I did my 1 year in Lucknow. And so then I was like, okay, I want to apply again. I want to go again. And so I applied for Bangla and was accepted, but then it was online, which counted for one of the 2 times. So if students are doing it virtually, it does count as one of their 2 times that they're able to do the program. And so I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll save it for a different in-person experience later on. If I get accepted again. But so students will definitely, when they get back, they're like, I want to apply again, and do their 2nd year, which is a lot of fun. We had a lot of students that did that, that applied for their 2nd year once they got back. So just a little bit, you can see some pictures here. This was my host family. So Rob, the guy in the orange shirt there, he and I were housemates. So he was also studying Urdu, but he was at a more advanced level because he'd been studying it for a while. And so they kind of put a more advanced speaker with a beginner speaker in the host family to help like kind of with those communication things. And so it was a lot of fun. We really enjoyed our time. Spending time, and I really enjoyed having the kids there, just because it gives you a different element to learning a language and just having fun with them. And so that was a really great experience. These are some pictures of Lucknow, just so you can kind of see. I'm sure maybe many of you or some of you have been to India anyways, so you kind of know what it looks like and what it entails, all the fun foods, fruits. We had this coffee shop that we came to study at all the time, which really worked. And that's the main thing, is the students need to kind of figure out what works for them during their experience, because as I mentioned, you have people that are like counting on this language ability to be able to do their PhD research, right? No pressure. And so how they study, and if they had kids at home, you know, maybe they needed to be more outside, right, when they did their studies, so that way they could have more of that peace and quiet. Everyone thrives in a different environment for studying, and so it really is up to the student to take that upon themselves to be like, okay, how am I going to be the most successful? Because I mean, you're getting a lot of homework every night, right? So basically you study until maybe 12 or 1, and then you get to do your cultural classes. And then basically you have the afternoon, right, evening, to work on your homework. And it depends, right, how serious you are about the language, how much time, effort, energy you want to put in to it as well. And so that's just one thing that's really important, is there is a lot of individual ownership, right, over this program. It's not just like, oh, I'm on vacation. It's not like that at all. You're literally dedicating your time to learning a language, a whole year's worth of language in a matter of 2 months. So it is quite intensive. It's a quite intensive program. So this was a little van that came to pick me up every day, which is a lot of fun. It came on the same time and honked its little horn when we got there. This is just kind of the beginning of what we started at, and then to the point where I was able to read, and we went through and did translations. And then this was one of my final projects, was being able to write a poem in Urdu, which was a lot of fun. So if you imagine looking at the first picture where you're learning literally the alphabet, and getting to the point where you can write a whole poem, that was pretty cool experience. The other thing that's really nice is you get a language partner, and so basically you have to spend, I think it's minimum of 2 hours a week with them as you are going along. And so basically it's meant to help with that immersion, to give you more of a friend versus a teacher, where you can go around, see the city, and have that practical immersion experience. And so this is my language friend. We still talk, which is a lot of fun. But we really enjoy going out. She brought me to a lot of different places. So I wasn't as much of like, okay, let's meet at a coffee shop and study. I'm like, okay, let's go see the city. What places are your favorite? And we did like photo shoots around the city. We went to see the different religious places. We went to some of her favorite restaurants, different things like that. So we really enjoyed our time, and it is a really essential piece of the program. Is not only having that host family, but being able to have the host friend, where you are being able to have that extra person that's there for support, as well as kind of going through that process of like, right, that more of that language immersion. And so basically they're not meant to be there as a teacher, but they're meant to be there just to kind of guide you and talk with you a little bit more practically through the language. These are just some more pictures of me and our different excursions out and about. So for the cultural classes, it really depends on your language and which program you're a part of. So for me, me being me, right, I signed up for like 3 or 4 different cultural classes, because that to me is a really important part, you know, of the environment and of the experience. So I signed up for chicken embroidery. So that's basically the version of like, not cross stitch, but that's how they do the embroidery there in Lucknow. Lucknow is known, so it's kind of funny. So Lucknow is known for chicken, and so when we first got there, we thought it was like the food chicken, right? And so Lucknowi chicken is actually a type of stitch that they have, and all of their dresses are beautifully done in this chicken embroidery. So I learned that. I learned Urdu calligraphy, and I took a dance class as well. So those were the main cultural elements that I did. I really enjoyed them, and you got to meet different teachers, and you had different people in your classes. So that was the really nice thing, was to be able to meet other people in my cohort and spend time with them as well too. So this is just a quick picture of our cohort. So just so you can kind of get a quick glance just of kind of the demographics, ages. We had people that were, I think, in their 50s on the course, and people who literally, as I mentioned, just kind of were in their very first year, finishing their first year of college. And so quite a wide range of people. I also had someone who's studying more security measures. So if you think of like for the FBI, things like that, CIA, someone in our group was doing that type of work. Someone wanted to become a US diplomat, so we had someone doing that. I'm just trying to see who else was here and what they were studying. We had a couple people that wanted to join the Foreign Service, so this is a really great option for them if they're studying poli-sci or anything like that. But yeah, so that, I would say that's the majority of our group there. Free time and time management, that's one of the biggest things is, right, you do have a lot of free time, but it's how you manage it, right? So a lot of students in the group, they spend time traveling on the weekends and going out and seeing different things. I personally, because I had been to India before, I chose to spend that time with my host family and really getting to know Lucknow, because I knew I would have the chance to go back you know, and explore different times and things. But the students took trips to like the Taj Mahal, Jaipur, kind of that area, to the mountains as well. So they really enjoyed their time on the weekends. And like I said, it just totally depends on what the student's motivation is. We had a student who was a former like Army. He was in the Army, and he needed Urdu for his future career perspectives and what he was looking to do. And so he literally stayed on the weekends and just studied, studied. For me, I would say I kind of did a balance. I would study, but I also wanted to spend that time with my family and enjoying with the kids and things like that. So that was kind of where my priority was kind of the practical side of the language, and then also the book side. And then, as I mentioned, some of the students would just go just go travel to see different places while they were there, because who knows if they'd ever get back again. And so everyone has their own interests and motivations and kind of their priorities while they're there. So it really is up to the student to be able to have excellent time management skills and be able to kind of manage that. So just a little bit post CLS, definitely I've used my language skills in Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, India, just through my travels. And so that's one thing that I can't stress enough. And we can kind of talk through that bit of the application process and what that looks like, is really that practical why behind it. It's not just like, oh, I want to go study abroad, right? It's basically going through and saying, okay, how am I going to use this language in my future, right? And you're like, okay, Sarah, tell me, how is a first-year college student supposed to know what their whole future is, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean it has to happen, right? So I could say like, okay, so I want to use this practically now, so that way I can take the foreign service exam once I'm done and graduated with college or university, right? So that could be a goal of mine. Whether or not I actually obtain the foreign service officer, they're not going to hold me to that, but it basically allows you to get that practical side of, okay, here's my why, here's how I'm going to use it, and here's how I'm prepared to be a cultural ambassador, right? So they're not just, I mean, that's a strong part of it too, right? Is, can you live with a host family? How would you represent the U.S. abroad, right? And I always say, like, we're walking billboards, right? When we are abroad, you know, of our family, of our university, of our states, right? And of our country. And so just being able to carry that weight and to be able to understand the weight of that when you are abroad, especially on a U.S. funded program, that's really important for the students. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I think we're about 27 minutes. So I will go ahead and just open it up for questions. Anything that you might be wondering or curious about, If we don't have any questions, I'm happy to just keep chatting kind of about the experience and everything like that. But definitely we can open it up for questions.
Thank you, Sarah. That was really fascinating. So glad you could share your experience with us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank
That's
you.
great. Yeah, someone asked if you can put your email back up, please. So I can type it in the chat box, or you can?
Yeah, I will just type it there. You can either email me personally. I'm always happy to do like seminars or sessions and go through the PowerPoint with your students as well. Otherwise, yeah, my work email works just as well.
Great, thank you.
So good to see you, Sarah. Hi, yeah.
Yeah, hi, Erica.
Sorry I came in a little bit late, so I apologize if you already like answered this question. I'm sure you did, but I completely missed it. But what was the duration, and are there options to like change, like are there like different within this program, are there like different like lengths of time, or is there like a recommendation, or how does that piece work?
Sure, yeah, great question. So the duration's typically going to be around 2 to like 2.5 months, kind of depending on the program and where you're located. But they also came out with a new program, which is virtual, and it's a year-long virtual study. And so that one, I think it's a newer program, so I don't have too much information on that, but that's going to be like, okay, they're going to be in Appleton, still being able to study that. But yeah, typically if the students are planning to go abroad, it'll be about 2.5 months, 2 to 2.5 months. Oh yeah, great question. So for those that wanted to travel on the weekends, it kind of depends. So we get a stipend, right? But it's going to depend on us what you want to spend the stipend on. If I'm just being completely honest, a lot of students spend more than their stipend. You can live on your stipend. It's basically meant to make sure, okay, you have a car to and from the institute every day if you need to get an Uber or a taxi, any food you might like, but the host families are supposed to feed us. So that's supposed to be kind of your breakfast, and then they feed us lunch at the institute and dinner as well at the host family's house. So anything extra you want that way. So I would say students do probably end up spending money just for the time on their own, but we do get a stipend, but it probably would not be able to cover everything like for the institute and then travel on the weekend. So they do recommend if students are able to have pocket money, but yeah, so they basically pay for the flight for us to get to DC and back, and then also to the institute wherever in the world we are learning. So.
Great, great. Thank you, Sarah. My question actually is, after you were there for those 2.5 months, how did you feel your language skills were, since it's a whole year of language packed into 2.5 months?
Yeah, great question. I would say everyone progresses differently, right? And they really say it's what you put into it is what you're going to get out of it, right? And so they do testing. The U.S. government has some external examiner that basically they give you a test at the beginning when you start, and then they'll give you a test once you're done. I started at an absolute complete beginner, and I became intermediate advanced, which is about 5 levels, that's pretty a lot, I would say, in terms, normally students will go up about 3-4 levels, 3 to 4 to 5. So I would say it definitely improved a lot. So the one thing that I would have appreciated more, right? So my perspective was I wanted to learn how to listen and speak, because that's the applicability that I needed for my role. Whereas someone else who's dissecting Urdu literature, they're going to need reading and writing, right? So the program doesn't necessarily cater to your specifics, if that makes sense. You're going to learn all 4 of them, and you're going to put time into all 4 of them. And so kind of their basis is, okay, if you can learn how to read and write, then you'll be able to speak and listen a lot more easily. Whereas for me, like having been an exchange student in Thailand, I never studied reading and writing, but I can speak Thai, right? Just through the immersion and that kind of a thing. And so it really depends, I would say, on someone's priority. And but I would say that you are learning all the basics of the language. So the other cool part about it is you get, I think it's 1 or 2 sessions a week with an individual tutor that you can work on what you want to work on. So I would go to them and say like, all right, I want to focus on listening and speaking. Let's do it. Where someone else would be like, okay, I want to learn how to read this poem. And so it really, that was the time that we were able to kind of cater our experience more so. But yeah, definitely super impressed with how much you learn, and you don't realize how fast it's going to go by. They have what they call a like a language policy, right? So when you're in the institute, and theoretically, once you're outside of the institute, you only speak your language that you're learning. So for beginners, they give us 2 weeks to kind of get off the ground running. But apart from that, there's then after those 2 weeks, there's no more English within the institute. And so they hold that to be quite strict. They have like warnings, right, if people aren't following that. So it really is meant to be that full immersion experience where you really cut out that English aspect. But then also, right, when you have the students that are hanging out together after class and things like that, again, it's going to be up to you. Are you upholding that standard for yourself, or what do you want to get out of the program? So we did see some students that, yeah, jumped a couple levels, and then some students that jumped a few more. So
that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, great question. That's always the debate. So students say, I want to do a critical language scholarship program. Which program do I need to apply for to get in, right? So that's what students will ask a lot. And I would say yes and no, right? So some of the less popular, if you want to call it, languages are the less well-known, like Urdu, for example, Bangla, for example, maybe Punjabi, for example. Maybe some of those languages, you may not have as many students applying for them as you would like Arabic, for example. So Arabic has 3 different country locations, and I don't know how many cohorts, right? Whereas Urdu, we only had 30 students that were selected and only 1 cohort. And so it really kind of depends on the language and what is that why. So it's not necessarily a certain language is going to be easier than others. It's going to be what is your why to that language, right? And they really need to see that tie of not just, you really have to have that why there, and why it's essential, why you need that language in your life, why should they send you abroad, and what are you going to do with it once you return. So it's a lot more focused on the future, right? Like not just learning a language to learn it, but how are you going to applicably use it every single day once you're back. So they're not like going to want to send someone who's like, okay, I want to go learn it for the summer and then forget about it, right? But you have to have something tangible in place where it is like, oh, I might be able to use this, you know, in my career, or I want to apply for the FSOT exam, or right, my college, for example, Northeast Wisconsin Technical College, we didn't have the opportunity, right? There's no Urdu classes there. So I can use that to my advantage too, to say, okay, on my at my college, we don't necessarily have the language program availability, but this is how I'm going to practice it once I'm home, right? So it's a lot more on that self-study, that they want to be able to see that self-drive, that self-motivation, and how it's actually going to be applied to your life, not just a one and done, if that makes sense. So it's not necessarily going to be that a certain program is easier, because it's really your attachment to the why of that specific language that's going to make all the difference.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Are there any other questions?
And the one thing I will say too, if there isn't any specific questions, is so they actually do some training, the Liz, so she's super awesome. She works with all the alumni, but so they do training to have a, like for if you want to help students go through that process, they'll do some training with a representative on that campus, and then they'll list you on the website for your college name, and then your name, so that way students who are looking to study or looking to go on the program, they know who to contact. And also you can go through the training So you can get versed on like, okay, the whys, the hows, how do they apply? When are the deadlines? Why is it important? How do you help them have a successful application? Because, right, if they only accept 500 to 5,000, it's a really competitive program. People apply year after year after year and never get in, right? So it's like, okay, what is that why? And you really have to kind of, so just so you guys know, the evaluators, right, are going to be higher education representatives. And so, right, it is going to be people who send students abroad or who are familiar with language and why it's important. So they're going to be really the ones evaluating. So if you can kind of step into their mindset of that why, that's going to be really important to being able to not only help them fill out the application, but to have them have a successful application. For the languages that require prereqs, can you have previously learned in just a little bit of language and still go while being a beginner? Yeah, great question. So for the ones that require prereqs, I would say those are a bit more not competitive in the sense of, but more competitive in the sense of language ability, if that makes sense. So when you get there, they're going to test you. Because I was a beginner, I like looked at the piece of paper and I'm like, well, I don't know anything on this, so it's fine, right? But everyone else who is like had studied Urdu before, they got placed into certain classes, right? So my beginner course, there was just me and one other student. His name was Alex. He was studying for more of the security side, the FBI side, which was pretty cool. So we literally had our classrooms every single day with just the two of us in it. So talk about like personalized class sizes, whereas the more of the, how do you say, native language speakers, right, that were learning the reading and writing side of things, they would have classes maybe 5 or 6 people. So it just kind of depends on the size there. But yeah, so I mean, I had like traveled to India, Pakistan, Bangladesh prior to doing the experience in Lucknow. So I had picked up a little bit of Hindi and Urdu along the way. That I applied as a beginner because tangibly I did not know how to read and write. And so it's kind of like, right, if you study French and you haven't used it for like 18 years and you're like, all right, well, where do I pick this up? I have some, but I don't have some. Yeah, definitely you can apply as a beginner. But if they do have the prereq for the language requirement, you have to be able to show that you can fulfill that. And they are pretty strict and pretty competitive on that, being able to show. So let's say if one of the universities has an Arabic program where you've studied it for 2 years, yeah, it makes sense. Definitely you're going to apply for the 2 years, you know, because it has the language prereq. Whereas for Urdu, for example, you don't necessarily have to have any working knowledge. It can just be a passion of yours. It can be an area of interest. It can be an area where your family lives, or your former, right? If your family used to live there, and you want to go back and understand the culture and the language, because there's a lot of that as well too. Students wanting to go back to find their heritage, right? And to kind of experience that and understand, oh, where did my grandparents grow up, and that kind of a thing. So you have such a diverse range of the why people want to go. So, but I hope that, yeah, helps to answer the question a little bit.
That's fantastic. I want to go now.
Really?
I wish I knew about this year. I wish I knew about it years ago, but
yeah. Well, and that's the really cool thing is, you know, at UW-Eau Claire, they did allow me to go, right? I mean, I was fully working in my job and in my role, you know, and I basically took off work for 2 months, 2.5 months to go learn the language in hopes that it would be able to help me in my recruiting and meeting with students and talking with families. So it was personal, but it was also right for professional development as well too. So
right,
I was quite fortunate for that.
You give us something to think about.
So did they give you sort of like a sabbatical then, or were you just kind of given like a break in employment? Again, I'm sorry if you like answered that, but like that's really fascinating to me.
Yeah. So yes, I did have to get approval like from the chancellor and everything. But I basically was not, I mean, I was still an employee, but I wasn't like officially working for those 2.5 months. Yeah. Yeah. So I just saw one of the questions, do you have to be a full-time student to go? So technically, yes, but we do. So you do have students that want to do the critical language scholarship program to advance, maybe for their FSOT prep or anything like that, right? So if you have some of these critical language scholarships, or critical languages, that can help you on the Foreign Service Officer exam to get extra points. So some students are like, I really want to go on the critical language scholarship program, because there is no tie, right? There's like, you can go and you don't have to work for the government once you get back. It's one of the very few programs where you can go abroad without that kind of catch 22, or that fine line where it's like, okay, I'm going to have to commit beyond just the program itself. And so some students will literally just enroll in a full-time course, so that way they can go ahead and apply. I was in my marketing program, and so, but I was studying it online. So yeah, you do have to be a student to be able to go, and it can't be like a certificate. You have to be going for a specific degree program. I'm not quite sure with the COVID things if it is changed to full-time or part-time. Yeah, that was just going to be my thing. We'll have to take a look at the specifics on the website. I'm not sure if anything changed during COVID, but we were all full-time students when I went. And so basically they had that program, and since then they've been offering the opportunity. So I did so they offered the opportunity for previous critical language scholarship recipients to do kind of like a follow-up language course, to be able to keep those studies alive for those students that didn't necessarily have those programs on their campus. So I was able to do that as well too. So I got an extra 2 months of study. I think it was about a year ago, maybe, or half a year ago, where literally I was studying with my old teachers in Lucknow over the video call. So they've been adding a lot of more virtual options to make it more accessible for everyone. Can you be studying at a foreign university? Does it have to be a U.S. institution? I believe it has to be a U.S. institution. The students can be on study abroad, if that makes sense, but it does, I believe, have to be, and it's only for U.S. I don't want to say citizens for lack thereof. If we're, there may be some exceptions to that citizens word, but you do have to be, it's not for international students, if that makes sense. So yes, I believe it has to be at a U.S. institution in order to be able to apply. But we have many students that are like studying abroad that semester. They are barely trying to make it home for the, 1 week in time to turn it around, so that way they can go out for orientation to DC and then back out again. So, but yeah, students who are studying abroad can apply, but I do believe it has to be a U.S. institution.
Thank you, Sarah. We are about at time right now. So we thank you so much for your time today. This has been enlightening. I think you've inspired all of us. So thank you so much.